What's good, y'all, and welcome back to another edition of Mr. Fitzgerald's biology class. Today we're going to dive into blood types as well as something that's a little bit different in dihybrid crosses. So these two things don't correlate, they're just kind of together because they're relatively shorter compared to the other stuff we've done since we've spent so much time talking about the monohybrid crosses and incomplete as well as codominance. So now we're going to kind of wrap up some of those things, add in a thing that's a little bit new but somewhat related, and kind of finish up a lot of this introductory genetic stuff before we get to some more complex stuff a little bit later. So let's dive right in overall. Now, blood types, there are a couple different blood types overall. You have your different types as A, B, and O. Yes, there are positives and negatives. We're not going to care about those for the purpose of this class. We're not going to look into RA groups or all those sugars that are involved in that. We don't need to know all of that. What we need to know is the inheritance patterns of the overall type of the individual, and that'll be its phenotype. So don't worry about positives and negatives. They do exist, but not for the Punnett squares that we're going to do in this class. All right, so now blood types is a little bit weird. It's an example of something called multiple alleles, and what that means is you have more than just two alleles for a gene. Like before, we had like alleles for red and alleles for white. And sometimes they might mix together to make pink, or they might make roan cattle where there's red and white shown together, or red might be dominant to white and only shown. Those are like really just two alleles. You have two options, red or white. Well, blood types, you actually have more than two overall options. So we have a couple different letter combinations that can come out of this. So you can have two A's together to represent that a person has blood type A. You can have an A with an O. You can have an A with a B. You can have B with a B. You can have B with an O and two O's as well. So there's a lot more different combinations here than we normally would get. Typically with two alleles overall, one and one, like red and white, you would only have three possible combinations of those. Now we're adding another allele in this one, and now we add up to 6 different combinations. So let's kind of get into this one a little bit. So we don't usually write the alleles as just A's, O's, B's. We actually write them a lot of times on worksheets and tests like this, where it's I to an A and I to a B, and then a little I. And the reason they do this is to show you that this I with an A would be a dominant because it's got that capital letter. This I with a B is also a dominant, and this little I is more of a recessive overall. And you can think of the I as like an indicator. Like when you're getting your blood drawn and they're telling you what your blood type is, they're using indicators to figure that out. So you can think of indicator A, indicator B, or indicator over here. So don't panic if you see I's and A's and stuff on a test. That's just the way we actually write blood types. So now, is blood type A codominant, incomplete dominant, or normal dominant recessive? Well, this one's a little bit more complicated. It's both a codominant and a normal dominant and recessive. So let's dive into that a little bit. So if I have alleles A and B, those are the two dominant alleles, okay? If you remember on the previous slide, they had the I with the A at the top and the capital I with the B at the top, showing that those are both dominant. The O would be the lowercase I or the recessive. So if a person has the allele of A with O, they actually show a blood type of A. If they have an allele B with an O, they show a blood type of B because B is dominant to O, A is dominant to O. And when you have two O's together, that would be having that double recessive being homozygous recessive, so then you're going to show blood type O. All right, so A and B are also codominant. So if I have an allele A and an allele B together, I'm going to end up with blood type AB. So this is where I can get blood type A, blood type B, blood type O, and blood type AB. I have 4 different phenotypes now because I have this multiple allele having an A, a B allele, and an O allele. The different combinations I can get with those, as well as the fact that A's and B's are dominant to O's. Okay, so this is where a lot of students start to kind of lose it a little bit, but don't panic too much, okay? Let's try a practice example, and I'm going to use the I's here, okay? I'm going to use the I's because it's more professionally how we write it. So what are the possible blood types for a child that's produced by a cross of parents who are, so I have one parent that has A, so the I with the A, so that's blood type A, with an O. That lowercase I is an O, right? Because that's the recessive trait. So I have blood type A with blood type O. So you could kind of view this as an AO. And a parent that is homozygous recessive, so blood type O overall. So they got the 2 recessive alleles. All right? let's draw this one up. We got a Punnett square started. I'm going to put the one parent on the side here. You got the blood type A here, that indicator A. I got the recessive allele here for the O. Then the blood type of O at the top, the two I's get split apart. Okay, so it's kind of a little like we've done incomplete dominance here on writing this, but it is a co-dominant situation, so it does get a little confusing for some people. All right, now we match them up. So I got these two come together, right? I think it goes across, yeah. These two come together. I got the bottom coming together and the bottom coming together. So overall, so in here I have a 50-50 kind of split with my phenotypes, all right? I got 50% chance of being type A, right? Because these would both show as type A since A is the dominant trait. And I got a 50% chance of showing type O. These are the recessive traits, so these would show as O, all right? Now, that kind of concludes blood types a little bit. It's not as complex as it looks. Just really take your time and remember that blood type A and blood type B are the dominant alleles, O is the recessive. And sometimes they write O's as little i's and the blood type A and B as capital I's with little a's and B next to it. All right, let's look at dihybrids. This is another one that kind of trips some students up. So we got all the tricky stuff today. So let's say that we have dark leaves are dominant to light leaves and tall is dominant to short, okay? So what are the possible offspring of a homozygous dominant parent for both traits that was crossed with a heterozygous parent for both traits? Right? So homozygous dominant means that it's going to be, two capital letters, right? Dominant meaning capital and homozygous meaning same. So I have dark leaves as dominant, so I'm going to have two capital letters for that one, and tall as dominant, so two capital letters for that. So this homozygous dominant parent for both traits is going to be capital D, and capital T, because they're dominant for tall, and dominant for dark leaves here. Now, if I'm crossing that with a heterozygous parent for both traits, then that's going to be one capital and one lowercase for each of the following combinations. I'm going to have one capital allele for dark, one lowercase, and one capital allele for tall, and one lowercase as well. All right, so now we got to put this into a Punnett square, and not just any Punnett square, a really big Punnett square, because we have two traits that we're using simultaneously. So what we're going to have to do is, unfortunately, 16 boxes at the same time. Now, I know most of you are like, oh dear Lord, not 16 boxes. It's actually not as scary as it looks. Just like a lot of things in genetics, they look scary, but they're really not that difficult. So what I've done is I've color-coded a little bit to show you kind of where I'm pulling these letters from. So if you notice, I have one of the D's in black here, one of the D's in blue, black, and blue. So that way you can see where I've pulled these combinations from. And then I have this kind of ugly brown color and purple for the other ones, so you can kind of see. So we're going to kind of split these up. Now, the first way that we're going to do this is kind of thinking of this as an isolation thing, right? I know I can only give one D as a parent, right? If this plant is a parent, it's only going to give one of these D traits and one of the T traits, but I don't know which one it's going to get. So the easiest way to do that is to kind of do it periodically through a pattern. So if I have a capital D, let's start off with this black D, all right? If this black D is given, that means it can give either one of these T's. So let's say the black D is given first, as well as the black T. All right, so I got capital D and capital T from these two right here, because it just happened to give this one and this one. It might, though, have given this capital D, this first D, and also this blue T over here. So it could have been the outside, right? Or maybe it's not even the first capital D, maybe it's the second one. So you can kind of see the pattern here. What if I'm looking at this blue D and it gives this black T, all right? And what if it's the two blue ones? Now, what we've done here is we end up with the same result, right? Because these can only give a capital D and a capital T. So it's not that complicated looking at this example, right? It'll be a little bit more apparent over here. But we're taking one of these D's that we don't know what we're getting, and we're mixing it with the other T that we don't know what we're getting. And this should look like something familiar in math class. It should look like FOIL. If you notice, I did the first ones in the group, I did the outside ones, I did the inside, and I did the last. First, outside, inside, last. Or you could just think of, hold this one, give the different combinations, hold this one, give the different combinations, and I lay them out, okay? So let's view that FOIL idea over here. Well, if I'm doing the first ones, all right, I got the brown D with the brown T, boom, okay? Outside will be the brown D with the lowercase purple T here. So now I got something kind of different. So I could either get the dominant trait for dark leaves or the tall trait, or I could get the short trait that's brought over with that. Well, what if the purple D is given? right? So I can get the purple D, so the light leaves, as well as the tall trait with the capital T. Or I could get the two lowercase letters, okay, the double recessive. Okay, so overall, I got some different options that I can kind of plug and play. And this is why we have 4 boxes going across with 2 letters in each box, because I'm looking at 2 traits simultaneously, and I'm looking at the possibilities of combining those together. And I only got 4 different combinations that I could make. And it's much more apparent on here. Put the 2 capitals, I can put the first capital with the second lowercase, I can put the first lowercase with the second capital, or I can put the 2 lowercases together. Boom. All right, now you cross them up like you normally would, right? You put all the D's in here, you got 2 D's and 2 T's in all of these boxes, right? Because these started off with 2 D's and 2 T's. So kind of plug them in. So here we go. Wow, I had some interesting additions here. There we go. All right, so when you stick them all in here, you end up with all of these having this capital D and this capital T going all the way down. Because if you notice, these all stay the same. So they're all going to give the same thing. So this really what's determining what the outcome is going to be these top ones in this scenario, because again, this one didn't have a lot to go with. It's homozygous. It can only give a capital D, it can only give a capital T, so all these are the same. So that's why all these columns are identical. All right, so the outcomes would be as follows. Homozygous dominant for both traits, 4/16 or 25%. You get homozygous dominant for the dark leaves with a heterozygous for tall at 25%. Heterozygous for the dark leaves, homozygous for tall, and then you have double heterozygous here, okay? So looking at this, we can get 4 different genotypes from this outcome. It's not always the case, but in this one, we got 4 different genotypes as our outcomes, and each of them is 25%. So it was a pretty overall easy one to do. All right, well, let's look at their phenotypes. Well, phenotypes is their expression. So what are they going to show? Well, I have a capital D here, I have a capital D here, I have a capital D in this case, and a capital D in this case. So they all have capital Ds, which means they're all going to show that dark leaf trait. If I have capital T, capital T, capital T, capital T, just at least one capital T in all these examples, then I'm going to have the tall trait as well. So all of these would show as tall. So overall, in each scenario, man, I should get rid of this animation. In each scenario, I'm going to end up with dark leaves, and I'm going to end up with tall plants, because that's all I have to work with, right? It's all that was given. Everybody got a dark trait, everybody got a tall trait, mainly because of this parent over here gave all that, so it kind of dictated what everything else got. That's all we have for the lesson today. Make sure you rewatch sections if you need to, and complete the blood types and the dihybrid cross worksheet. Reach out to me if you have any questions, and have a great day.